Mr. WALZ for 28 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on the floor and to give this chamber a demonstration of what's so great about this country. The previous gentleman's district actually borders mine, but you may not find a more diametrically opposed view of what's happening in this country than you may get in the next 28 minutes. You hear a lot of statistics, and you hear a lot of things thrown out. You hear a lot of economists talking about different things. The one thing that I've found, and I think maybe it comes from being new to this business of politics, coming from a high school classroom, coming out of what most middle-class Americans are experiencing, is that many of those things do not matter to people. What matters to them is the reality in their everyday lives. And that reality doesn't take a whole lot of background from them. It doesn't take a whole lot of statistics. It doesn't take a whole lot of anything other than for them to make some simple judgments. And one of those judgments that the American public is going to ask themselves, and they're going to get to ask themselves in November, after 12 straight years of Republican control of the House of Representatives, after 6 years of total control of both branches of the legislative process, the American people got a chance to see by the fall of 2006 the direction that those policies had taken us in. And in watching that, they made a decision come November. They chose about 45 new members of this body, many of them without elected office experience, but many of them who came from the ranks of middle-class working people. Many of them, like myself, that never had a salary over $50,000. Teaching for 18 years, my salary when I left my teaching position was $48,000 a year. My insurance costs coming off the top of that were $7,200 a year, and then the taxes that came after that. And one of the things the American public will ask is, were they better off before that time when President Bush and the Republican-controlled Congress took over, or were things going in the wrong direction? Were decisions made that were affecting their lives negatively, and what were those decisions doing to them? What was happening, as you saw the previous speaker talk about? What was happening to the price of fuel? Why was gas going up, and who was benefiting from it? Why was the cost of their produce, why was the cost of groceries going up, and who was benefiting from that? What was happening to the cost of tuition? What was happening to their paycheck? What was happening to insurance costs? And those were questions that they don't get to stand here and theoretically talk about and come up with some cute alliteration that I always hear. My colleagues are wonderful at the alliteration, somewhat weak on the policy that impacts people's lives. And so as I listen this week, and I watch a concerted effort, and one of the magazines on Capitol Hill wrote about that our friends in the minority have decided they're going to try and pin the energy policies on the new majority, understanding that President Bush will veto any attempt we make to change policy. The policies that we're operating under in this economy are the ones that were put into place by the minority and put into law by the president. The changes that have been attempted and those that have been made, such as CAFE standards, are the fuel efficiency standards, and improving them for the first time in 35 years, are so overwhelmingly accepted by the American public, those could not be ignored. The ideology that was being expressed by the previous speaker, I think, is reflected in some, you don't need the polls when you go out and talk to people, but if you want to get to the data that you're hearing them talk about, 72% of the American people disagree. 28% of the American people agree that President Bush's economic policies are the right direction for this country. So when I hear talks about supply and demand, as if it is gravity, as if there have not been decisions made to influence either the supply chain or the demand by interest, by the growth, the astronomical growth of lobbyists, especially energy lobbyists at this place, is bordering on the ridiculous. And when I hear about Adam Smith being talked about, the only invisible hand that's operating in our energy markets is that invisible handshake that happened in the White House between the oil company executives when they created this current energy policy.